Welcome back to my course Industrial Biotechnology. Today I want to share with you a very interesting fermentation process, that is the wine industry, which is largely in operation throughout the world. Now wine, as you know, it is produced from the fruit juice. Wine is the product by the alcoholic fermentation of juice of sound and ripe grape and the usual cellar treatment. What do you mean by sound and ripe grape? Sound grape means the texture of the grape should be hard, it is not soft. And what is ripe? If it is ripe, then and only then the sugar content or in the grape juice will be high. If it is unripe, then the sugar content will be less. So it is desirable that your grapes should be right. Sound and ripe. If it is sound, we can assume that microbial contamination in the grape will be very less. But if it is soft, there is a possibility of more microbial contamination in the system. So usually we prefer sound and ripe grapes for the wine fermentation process, and that is followed by cellar treatment. Cellar is an underground tank where we keep the this fermented material for longer period of time, not only for clarification of wine, but also I told you in the last class that during the beer making industry, that during the maturation process, the alcohol, the acid and alcohol, they form the ester, because after the alcoholic fermentation, what happens that lot of free organic acid that present in the fermentation broth, that gives some kind of harsh flavor. So it is mandatory that it is to be passed through some kind of maturation process. The cellar is the underground tank. We stored the material for a longer period of time. Now although most wine is made of grapes, but it may also be made from other fruits. As for example, apple juice. From apple juice we can produce wine. The science of wine and wine making is known as oenology. This is how terminology comes. Now if you look at the type of wine that is available, one is still wine, another is sparkling wine. What is the still wine? Still wine means that it doesn't have any carbon dioxide, and in case of sparkling wine there is a carbon dioxide, so there is the emergence of carbon dioxide. So this is the basic difference. So still wine production without carbonation and sparkling wine with carbonation, both natural and injected. This you can do either two way. You can allow the fermentation to continue so that carbon dioxide organism will produce carbon dioxide there itself, or we injected carbon dioxide from outside. Now if you look at the classification, we can have different types of wine. We have appetizer wine, the typical name is sherry, dry to sweet. What is the dry wine? Dry wine means that wine doesn't have any kind of sugar, because sweetness will be as low as possible, because if you touch the wine there should not be any kind of sweetness. That is called dry wine. And then red table wine is Vino Rosso, there is a dry to sweet, and Burgundy, this is dry. And wheat table wine is a Rhine wine, it is dry. Desert wine is example is the port with the red and white to tannery, but this is sweet in taste. And sparkling wine, we know that it is quite throughout the world is very common, that we have Champagne. Champagne is a name of a place which is located just 140 kilometer from the Paris. So you might be knowing that France is very famous for wine making, and two particular wine is worldwide is largely in use, that is the white wine and red wine, that is considered as a table wine, because Western country they usually serve during lunch and dinner this wine. Now that Sampen, since the name of the place is Sampen, that is why it was Sampen. Now, not necessarily the sparkling wine is can only produce from the place of Sampen. Some other places also produce a sparkling wine. Then we marketed that as a sparkling wine, not as a Sampen. Sampen, when it is Sampen, it is the name of the place where it is produced. But if the name is sparkling wine, that is, it is produced other than the Sampen, other places, but it is of similar taste. Then red and white wine and sparkling wine contains about 10 to 14% alcohol by volumes, and appetizer and dessert wine contains about 20% volume by volume of alcohol. So this is the alcohol concentration is quite high as compared to beer. Now, broadly it can be classified as dry wine. I told you dry wine, that fermentation practically complete this in this wine. The fermentation complete in the sense I told you that a very small amount of sugar present in the wine, because it is, if you touch the wine there should not be any sweet perception. So it is that is why we call it a dry wine. And examples are red and white wine. This is example of dry wine. Then we have the example of the sweet wine. Sweet wine in which the fermentation has been arrested. So if the fermentation is arrested, then what will happen? Some sugar, unfermentable sugar that remain in the fermentation broth, in the wine, then it will be sweet in taste. Or purposefully we add some sweetening agent or some other material to it to make it sweet, because this contains sufficient sugar for sense perceptions, and they are fortified by the addition of brandy or that wine spirit. Now, sparkling wine, those which are made effervescent by secondary fermentation in the bottle or in bulk or carbonations. That is exactly I pointed out that not only you do the carbonation, by secondary fermentation also, when cell respired, it produces carbon dioxide. That effervescence will come from that also. Now, typical wine has a different color, almost clear, that green yellow, platinum yellow, pale gold, deep gold, pale salmon. So different color of wine that is available throughout the world, and examples of these wines are given here. Now, I was talking about sparkling wine. You can see, if you see it here, so it is like this. In the sparkling wine, that so you have that carbon dioxide, the bubbles of carbon dioxide, effervescence of carbon dioxide, that will be there. That is exactly what is happening here. This is carbon dioxide bubbling is there. This is called sparkling wine. But here there is no carbon dioxide. That is why it is called a still wine. If you look at here, that here it doesn't contain any kind of carbon dioxide. That is the champagne is prepared from a special variety of grape, and black variety Pinot Noir and the wheat Chardonnay. That is the cap of the bottles with the champagne, it is written like this, and the grapes are like this. Now, as far as grape is concerned, I like to point out that in our country, this grape usually there is kind of scaped, because it is supporting material is required for the plant to grow this grape plants. Then the grapes are hanging from this. But here in the western country, particularly if you look at, I shall show you some other slide, that it is just like a tree, and normal tree, and where these grapes are produced. So this is the different types. The type, it is capped, but this is just normal tree, the plantation that we have. Now, red wine, one contains the red color matter extracted from the skin of the grapes. Grapes has, we have two type of grapes, where one is green grapes, one is black grapes. So that red color, it comes from the skin of the grapes, and then Then white wine, the wine made from the white grapes, or maybe little bit greenish grape that we have, express the fresh juice of other grapes. The steps now, if you look at the steps of winemaking, first we crushing and steaming the grapes. Crushing means you have to crush so that you take out the juices from that, and steaming, that steaming means stems that is to be separated from the grapes, and then treated with sulfur dioxide or pasteurization. Usually we do the sulfide treatment. Potassium, we know potassium metabisulfide is a very good preservative that is used as a for the treatment of this wine, or we can pass it through the pasteurization process. We know the pasteurization process means the process through all the germ is killed. So in presence of chemicals we can kill the germs, by heating we can kill the germs. This is two way it can be done. Now this is the fermentation, this pass through the fermentation process, and this is basically different as compared to other fermentation process. The reason is that it is occurred in two different stages. One is called primary fermentation, another is secondary fermentation. Now primary fermentation is inoculated with a starter containing pure culture of yeast in the aerobic condition. Aerobic means it is the micro aerobic. We are not doing any kind of much of aeration. We know the yeast under aerobic condition it multiplies. And secondary fermentation, after short period of wine is drawn off and placed in a storage for further fermentation, and this is done in complete anaerobic condition. So this is partially aerobic condition. We allow the cell a little bit yeast to grow as simultaneously produce alcohol to some extent. But in the secondary fermentation process, this is a totally anaerobic condition. We produce our desired alcohol, main alcohol fermentation take place in the secondary process. Now after this is followed by racking. Racking is kind of separation of solid from the liquid or clarification of wine, storing for aging, and clarified and packed. So this is the subsequent operations that we have. Now if you look at the process flow diagram, it has look like this. We take the grapes from the gardens or from the field, then we wait. This is grapes weighted and samples of taken to the lab, and then we receive in the hopper, and then crusher and de-steaming, that we steams we separated out. And here I shall show you how the segregation of the steaming is done manually, and then it put is to the tank, followed by fermentation, cold soaking tank, followed by fermentation and possibly addition of macerations. That we carry out this fermentation like this here. And this is the primary fermentation take place. Then we pneumatic press, where because this fermentation process I told you, it is partially the aerobic fermentation process. Due to the aerobic fermentation process, it produces lot of carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide, that your juice contains lot of seed, skin and stems, so they attach to this and they float at the top of the fermenter. So you can this is called pomace, that you can separate it out. Pneumatic press, the juice separated from the skins and seed, and then we take it in the barrels or in the tanks for carrying out the malolactic fermentation process, where the malic acid, because malic acid is one of the important ingredients present in the grape juice, that is converted to lactic acid. The malic acid is a harsh flavor, but lactic acid doesn't have harsh flavor. Besides that, lactic acid has some property of preservation. It can use as a preservatives. Then we pass it through the aging process. I told you the importance of aging and rocking process for the clarification of wine. Then we blended the tanks as per our requirement, and we clarified here. We filter the suspended material through passing through the filtration. After that, we can here also, like I told you, in case of beer, we have two type of marketing. We have short time market, we have long time market. In the short time market, we can use little bit of preservative and sell it in the market, and but in case of long time market, we pass through the pasteurization process, then we do the bottling. The raw materials, that is use the grapes, I told you, which contain about 10 to 20% weight by volume, and sugar in the form of fructose. I told you that fructose is 10 times sweeter than sugar, than glucose. Grapes contains the nitrogen in the form of protein, and is sufficient for the growth of the organism, because this is the anaerobic fermentation process. We require very less amount of nitrogen for the growth of organism, and but it requires some minerals and vitamin, a small amount, for the growth of the yeast cells. The pH is usually 3 to 3.6, and a typical acid that present one, the malic acid, citric acid, and tartaric acid. Now, tartaric acid is responsible for the formation of cream of tartar. Cream of tartar means, I shall discuss later on, this is called bitartaric acid, and this tartaric acid, when the alcohol concentration is high in the fermentation media, then it forms the Li. Li means a kind of that white layer formations will take place. So that is due to the bitartaric formation, that is we call cream of tartar. Now then that crushing and steaming of grapes, the fine quality of grapes at proper maturity are to be collected. I told you the grapes should be sound and ripe, and the quality of the grapes of a given variety will depend on the condition under which they are drawn, soil, climate, and other conditions. This is a couple of things that is important, and grapes should be transported in clean containers, and they are crushed and steamed by a machine, and stainless steel is prepared as the material of construction for the machine to avoid the ferric acid. Now let me tell you here what do you mean by ferric acid. Ferric acid is nothing but it is the iron tannate, because the iron tannin and tannic acid present in the fruit juice, in the grape juice, and if you crush by using some kind of iron materials, then if iron by chance come in contact with tannin, it will produce some kind of cloudy, because that is why we sometimes we see the haziness of the fruit juice due to the formation of iron tannate. This is called ferric acid. Now this is exactly that I was telling that this is the normal tree that you can see is not a scraper, because it is just this is a tree where this grapes are hanging. You can see it. This looks like this. This is called sound, and this might be ripe properly. That this is like this, and this is the the kind of the collection system, that is mechanically this grape can be collected and it is stored in the some kind of wagon here. So you can do the manually, you can do the mechanical. Mechanically, if you do, they have a collecting tank here, so they can collect, and manually also you can collect and put it in the storage tank that here. Then after that, you collected, when you mechanically collected, you unload it in kind of hopper, and then in the hopper you have to segregate that, of whatever the stems and other things that is present there, you have to manually you have to take it out. And then we take further precautionary measures just to ensure the quality of grape that is coming into the process is perfect, and ultimately it go to the crusher like this, and you take out the juices, and you crush this material, and fresh this juices comes out like this. So Now, treatment with the grape juice. Grape contains a variety of flora on their surfaces. In order to destroy the organism which contaminates the wine, the crush grape mass is treated with sulfur dioxide or sulfide. I have given the typical example. Mostly I told you potassium metabisulfite is mostly used as a food preservative, and 0.1 to 0.4 kg of potassium metabisulfite is added per 1000 kg of grape juice. For this is required. The amount of sulfide depends on the maturity of the grape. I mentioned that if the maturity, if it is over matured, there is a possibility of more grapes, more contaminants. So, you required more potassium metabisulfite. Degree of contamination of the molds, temperature of the crushed grapes, etc. Because the fruits usually should be crushed at a low temperature. Then fermentation, the choice of organism, the yeast used the preparation of the wine should possess the following characteristics: alcohol tolerance. I mentioned during the alcohol fermentation process that here the concentration of alcohol is about 10 to 20%. So, 10% alcohol production, we require minimum 20% of sugar, and 20% alcohol production minimum we require 40% of sugar. So, it should have the sugar tolerance as well as the alcohol tolerance characteristics. Give the characteristic flavor or aroma or bouquet, and typical the yeast that is used for the winemaking industry, what is called Saccharomyces ellipsoideus. This is the yeast cell that is used in this fermentation process, and higher yield in shorter period of time, that is another characteristic of the organism. Now, if I told you that that wine fermentation usually carried out in 2 stages. The grape juice contain high amount of sugar, so no sugar is required, and if the sugar content is less, then we add some kind of syrup in it. The oak wood container is used, which does not impart undesirable color to the wine. And for the preparation of the red wine, red wood containers is used. Sometimes I mentioned this red colored wine, the color usually come from the skin of the grapes. Sometimes the red wood container also contributes some color to the wine. Now, the capacity of the container is about 50,000 gallons. 50,000, you know that 1 gallon is approximately equal to 3.78 liters. Now, let me talk about little bit on the primary fermentation process. In the primary fermentation process, the yeast cell suspension is added to the grape juice, and then fermentation occurs for 3 to 5 days. Sufficient tannins are extracted out during the active fermentation. Agitation further facilitates this process. 2 to 3% alcohol is generally produced in this fermentation tank, and small amount of air is available so the yeast can grow. So, this is the primary fermentation process. Secondary fermentation process, the partially fermented juice is transferred to the secondary fermentation tank. Fermentation occurs about 7 to 11 days. The tank should be completely filled with fermentation broth, so we can have the perfect anaerobic conditions. Then there should not be no way to increase the number of yeast cells in the secondary, because that we know that during the anaerobic fermentation the growth of organism will be very low. So, yeast growth will be negligible, and optimum temperature is 21 to 24 degrees centigrade, and temperature controlled by cooling coil. I was talking about the one important step for winemaking industry is the racking. Racking is done for dual purpose. One is for clarification of wine to prevent the undesirable flavor and substances coming out from the old yeast cells. Now, racking drawn up the wine from the lees or sediment. I told you that potassium bitartrate that produce actually that cream of tartar. This forms a lee kind of white layers, that formation is there. So during racking process, we separate the lees and other sediment. That is we separated out. This substance is less soluble in alcohol than in water and precipitated out. So at the beginning, that potassium bitartrate will not give any kind of problem with the fruit juice, but as soon as the alcohol production increases, then it started producing some kind of lee at the surface. Then that precipitate has to be taken it out. Now, during aging, as far as wine is concerned, that the aging is very important. The clarification of wine and development of flavor, because aging, I told you, when you keep the fermented liquid for longer period of time in the cellar, then whatever suspended material is there, that will settle down, and not only that, it gives an opportunity to that alcohol and acid, they combine together and form esters, and we know the esters are responsible for development of different flavors. So this is very important. Now wine is then flash pasteurized, heat for a short time. I mentioned previously the HTST technique largely used in the biochemical industry for the pasteurization process, because the reason is that at lower temperature we find it is more detrimental to the quality of the, it affects the quality of the media with respect to vitamin and amino acid, destruction will take place. But if you increase higher temperature, that will be more effective for killing the organism. So if we use the high temperature short time, so you expose the material for shorter period of time, for that your loss of vitamin and loss of amino acid in the system will be minimum. That is why it is used the flash pasteurization process. After flashing, it kept at the room temperature for 1 to 2 days at -3 to -4 degrees centigrade to few days. And here I want to point out that we have two wine. We call dry wine. This is required 2 days for aging, and fine wine, it required 5 years for aging. Or because we know that wine, if you keep it for longer period of time, it will be more costly. The more if you keep it for longer period, the more acid and alcohol they form the esters. So the harshness of the wine will be totally removed, and in exchange of that, some good flavor, good smell or fine taste will develop. That is why it is very costly. Now the preparation of clear wine or clarification age wine is treated for clarifying or fining agent. I told you previously also, sometimes the fine particles are removed by using some kind of filter aid. Filter aid means some kind of bigger particle we add, so that finer particle adsorb on the surface of the bigger particle, and bigger particle will be easy to separate it out. So examples are bentonite, isinglass, that is kind of fish protein, and gelatin and casein that is used. In the packaging, the clarified one is placed in the oak barrel for bulk sale, in bottles or in can for unit sales. Bottles of small and medium size are pasteurized for 30 minutes, 140 degree Fahrenheit. The contamination, there are several contamination problem that we have. We have lactic acid bacteria contamination problem, then we have acetic acid bacteria contamination problem, and yeast contamination problem that we have in this fermentation process. The one typical contamination that I want to point out here, that is the presence of leuconostoc mesenteroid, and this leuconostoc mesenteroid produces dextrin, and this causes the ropiness of the wine. Here I want to point out that ropiness means the rope formation. This will be, it form rope like this, that that rope formation will take place like this. So inside this beer you will be having this kind of rope formation. This is undesirable, and this is due to the presence of this leuconostoc mesenteroid. The Saccharomyces cerevisiae is the common contaminants in this wine, because with Saccharomyces ellipsoideus and Saccharomyces cerevisiae, they require same media, same for their growth and metabolism. That is why, and this is available largely in the atmosphere. That is the common contaminants. Thank you very much.